They say, never meet your heroes, and as Sam becomes more closely acquainted with Charles II and his brother James, Duke of York, the mystery of majesty begins to slip. Sam ends the month with a wedding, and in great contentment, despite fears and troubles brought about by the sickness running rife in London. From Lockdown London in April 2020, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It's time for us to travel once more back to the year 1665. Hello and welcome. Are you sitting comfortably? Good, then we'll begin. I'm Tom Barclay Matchett, the London Storyteller. I share the stories of the people, places and personalities that have made London the finest city on earth. I'm currently sharing with people the Diary of Samuel Pepys from the year 1665, an era with many parallels to our own. Now, please settle in and we shall begin. July 26th, 1665. Up, and after doing a little business, down to Deptford with Sir William Batten, and there left him, and I to Greenwich to the park, where I hear the King and Duke are come by water this morn from Hampton Court. They asked me several questions. The King, mightily pleased with his new building there, great variety of talk, and was often led to speak to the King and the Duke. By and by they to dinner, and all to dinner, and sat down to the King, saving myself, which though I could not in modesty expect, yet God forgive my pride, I was sorry I was there, that Sir William Batten should say that he could sit down where I could not, though he had 20 times more reason than I. But this was my pride and folly. The King, having dined, he came down, and I went in the barge with him, I sitting at the door, hearing him and the Duke talk, and seeing and observing their manner of discourse. And God forgive me, though I adore them with all the duty possible, yet the more a man considers and observes them, the less he finds of difference between them and other men. Though, blessed be God, they are princes of great nobleness and spirits. The barge put me into another boat that came to our side, Mr. Holder with a bag of gold to the Duke, and so them away, and I home to the office. The Duke of Monmouth is the most skittish leaping gallant that I ever saw, always in action, vaulting or leaping or clambering. I home to set my journal for these 4 days in order, they being 4 days of as great content and honour and pleasure to me as ever I hope to live or desire, or think anyone else can live. For methinks, if a man could but reflect upon this, and think all these things are ordered by God Almighty to make me contented, and even this very marriage now on foot is one of the things intended to find me in content in my life, and matter of mirth, methinks it should make one mightily more satisfied in the world than he is. This day poor Robin Shaw at Backwell's died, and Backwell himself now in Flanders. The King himself asked about Shaw, and being told he was dead, said he was very sorry for it. The sickness is now got into our parish this week, and is got indeed everywhere, so that I begin to think of setting things in order, which I pray God enable me to put both as to soul and body. The 27th of July, 1665. Called up at 4 o'clock, up, and preparing some papers for Hampton Court, and so by water to Vauxhall. And there Mr. Gordon's coach came and took me up, and by I took up him, and so both thither, a brave morning to ride in, and good discourse with him. so dispatched all my business, having assurance of continuance of all hearty love from Sir William Coventry. And so we stayed and saw the King and Queen set out towards Salisbury, and after them the Duke and Duchess, whose hand I did kiss, and it was the first time I did ever, or did see anybody else kiss her hand, and it was a most fine white and fat hand. But it was pretty to see the young pretty ladies dressed like men, in velvet coats, caps with ribbons, and with laced bands just like men, only the Duchess herself it did not become. They gone, we, with great content, took coach again. At home, met the weekly bill. We're above 1,000 increase in them, Bill, and of them, in all, about 1,700 of the plague, which hath made the officers this day resolve of sitting at Deptford, which puts me into some consideration what to do. Therefore home to think and consider of everything about it, and without determining anything, ate a little supper, and to bed, full of the pleasure of these 6 or 7 last days. The 28th of July, 1665. Up betimes and down to Deptford, where, after a little discourse with Sir George Carteret, who is much displeased with the order of our officers yesterday to remove the office to Deptford, pretending other things, but to be sure it is with regard to his own house, which is much because of his family going away. I am glad I was not at the order making, and so I will endeavour to alter it. Set out with my lady alone, with her and with 6 horses to Dagenham's, going by water to the ferry, and a pleasant going and good discourse, and when there, very merry, and the young couple now well acquainted. But Lord, to see in what fear all the people do live would make one mad. They are afeard of us that come to them, insomuch that I am troubled at it, and wish myself away. But some cause they have. For the chaplain, with whom, but a week or 2 ago, we were here, mighty high disputing, is since fallen into a fever and dead, being gone hence to a friend's a good way off, a sober and healthful man. These considerations make us all hasten the marriage, and resolve it upon Monday next, which is 3 days before we intended it. Mighty merry all of us. And in the evening with full content took coach again, and home by daylight with great pleasure. And thence I down to Woolwich, where find my wife well, and after drinking and talking a little, we to bed. The 29th of July, 1665. Up betimes, and after viewing some of my wife's pictures, which now she has come to do very finely to my great satisfaction, beyond what I could ever look for, I went away, and by water to the office, where nobody to meet me, but busy all the morning. At noon to dinner, where I hear that my Will is come hither and laid down upon my bed, ill of the headache, which put me into extraordinary fear, and I studied all I could to get him out of the house, and set my people to work to do it without discouraging him. Writing of letters hard, and then at night home, and fell to my Tangier papers till late, and then to bed, in some ease of mind that Will is gone to his lodging, and that he is likely to do well, it being only the headache. The 30th of July, 1665. Lord's Day. Up, and in my nightgown, cap and neckcloth, undressed all day, lost not a minute, but in my chamber setting my Tangier accounts to right, which I did by night to my very heart's content, not only that it is done, but I find everything right, and even beyond what, after so long neglecting them, I did hope for. The Lord of heaven be praised for it. Will was with me today, and is very well again. It was a sad noise to hear our bell to toll and ring so often today, either for deaths or burials, I think 5 or 6 times. At night, weary with the day's work, but full of joy at my having done it, I to bed. being to raise betimes tomorrow to go to the wedding at Dagenham's. So to bed, fearing I have got some cold in my loose garment all this day. The 31st of July, 1665. Up, and very betimes, by 6 o'clock at Deptford, and there find Sir George Carteret and my lady ready to go. I being in my new coloured silk suit and coat trimmed with gold buttons and gold braid lace round my hands, very rich and fine. By water to the ferry, where, when we come, no coach there, and tide of ebb so fast spent as the horse-boat could not get off on the other side of the river to bring away the coach. So we were fain to stay there in the unlucky Isle of Dogs, in a chill place, the morning cool and wind fresh, above 2, if not 3 hours, to our great discontent. Yet, being upon a pleasant errand, and seeing that it could not be helped, we did bear it very patiently, and it was worth my observing, I thought, as ever anything, to see how upon these 2 scores Sir George Carteret, the most passionate man in the world, and that was in greatest haste to be gone, did bear with it, and very pleasant all the while, at least not troubled much so as to fret and storm at it. Anon the coach comes. In the meantime, there coming a citizen thither with his horse to go over, that told us he did come from Islington this morning, and that Proctor, the vintner of the Mitre in Wood Street, and his son, is dead this morning there of the plague. He, having laid out abundance of money there, and was the greatest vintner in London for some time for great entertainments. We, fearing the canonical hour would have passed before we got thither, did, with a great deal of unwillingness, send away the licence and wedding ring. So that when we came, though we drove hard with 6 horses, yet we found them gone from home and going toward the church, met them coming from the church, which troubled us. But, however, that trouble was soon over, hearing it was well done, they being both in their old clothes, my Lord Crewe giving her there being 3 coachfuls of them. The young lady mighty sad, which troubled me, but yet I think it was only her gravity, in a little greater degree than usual. All saluted her, but I did not, till my Lady Sandwich did ask me whether I had saluted her or no. So to dinner. And very merry we were, but yet in such a sober way as never almost any wedding was in so great families, but it was much better. My Lady Sandwich and I up to settle accounts and pay her some money, and mighty kind she is to me, and would fain have had got me down for company with her to Hinchingbrook, but for my life I cannot. At night to supper, and so to talk, and which methought was the most extraordinary thing, all of us to the prayers as usual, and the young bride and bridegroom too, and so, after prayers, soberly to bed, only I got into the bridegroom's chamber while he undressed himself, and there was very merry, till he was called to the bride's chamber, and into bed they went. I kissed the bride in bed, and so the curtains were drawn with the greatest gravity that could be, and so good night. But the modesty and gravity of this business was so decent that it was to me, indeed, 10 times more delightful than if it had been 20 times more merry and jovial. Whereas I feared I must have sat up all night, we did here all get good beds. And I lay in the same I did before with Mr. Brisbane, who is a good scholar and sober man, and we lay in bed, getting him to give me an account of Rome, which is the most delightful talk a man can have of any traveller. And so to sleep, my eyes much troubled already with the change of my drink. Thus I ended this month with the greatest joy that ever I did in my life, because I've spent the greatest part of it with abundance of joy and honour and pleasant journeys and brave entertainments and without cost of money. And at last, lived to see that business ended with great content on all sides. This evening, with Mr. Brisbane talking of enchantments and spells, I telling him of some of my charms, he told me of his own knowledge at Bordeaux in France. The words these: voici encore more, raide comme un baston, froid comme marbre, léger comme un esprit, livons tout au nom de Jesus Christ. He saw 4 little girlies, very young ones, all kneeling, each of them upon one knee, and one begin the first line, whispering in the ear of the next, and the second to the third, and the third to the fourth, and she to the first. Then the first begun the second line, and so round quite through. And putting each one finger only to a boy that lay flat upon his back on the ground, as if he was dead. At the end of the words, they did with their 4 fingers raise this boy as high as they could reach. And he, being there and wondering at it, as also being afeard to see it, for they would have had him to have bore a part in saying the words in those rooms of one of the little girls that was so young that they could hardly make her learn to repeat the words, did, for fear there might be some slight used in it by the boy, or that the boy might be light, called the cook of the house, a very lusty fellow, as Sir George Carteret's cook, who is very big, and they did raise him in just the same manner. This is one of the strangest things I have ever heard, but he tells it me of his own knowledge, and I do heartily believe it to be true. I inquired of him whether they were Protestant or Catholic girls, and he told me they were Protestant, which made it all the more strange to me. Thus we end this month, as I said, after the greatest glut of content that ever I had. Only some difficulty because of the plague, which grows mightily upon us. The last week being about 1700 or 1800 dead of the plague. My Lord Sandwich at sea with the fleet of about 100 to sail norward, expect De Ruyter or the Dutch East India fleet. Myself, having obliged both these families in the business very much, as both my lady and Sir George Carteret and his lady do confess exceedingly, and the latter two also now call me cousin, which I am glad of. So, God preserve us all friends long, and continue health among us. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video. Please don't forget to add your comments, like and subscribe. Cheerio!